within 6 weeks to take matters further. It's not moving very fast, this program, but I just want to point out that the advanced world has accepted that there is going to be a measure of strain, and it's better that the debt problem be handled preemptively rather than wait for defaults like in the 1980s or like in the Asian crisis, which then feed on themselves and make matters much worse. So those are my comments on foreign debt. On domestic debt, which is also a big strain and is squeezing resources out of our economy. Let me start with the banking sector, because that will take us on to government debt and show the is having on the rest of the economy, the crowding out effect on the rest of the economy. Our banking sector is small, and there are lots of reasons for that. I won't bore you with them, but because the banking sector is small, we have one of the lowest private sector credit to GDP ratios, around 7. Lower the long-term cost of debt, and we need very badly to create a yield curve. Now, I don't want to go into detail, but yield curve simply means the government borrowing at 3, 5, 7-year maturities in such quantities that trading in those government securities, because the government is borrowing so much in those categories, instead of borrowing 30 and 90-day treasury bills, because it's borrowing so much, people will invest in that paper, trade in that paper. What you'll get is a liquid market, and that that the rate that 3-year paper trades at then is fixed. You have a benchmark, or you have a similarly for 5 years, similarly for 7 years, and therefore what the private sector can then do is issue fixed rate bonds, which in this market is absent. Our private sector shouldn't be, our big companies shouldn't be borrowing from banks. It's cheaper to borrow from the bond markets. In America, the bond market is about 4 times the size of corporate debt of banks. But our bond market is barely developed, and one of the biggest reasons for that is the absence of this yield curve. Anyway, those are the responsibilities of the debt manager. We expand mutual funds, add non-banks and stock exchange custody and clearing institutions, add them to your primary distributor list. So your primary distributors are not just 6 big banks, but a lot of market players. So you widen your distribution pool, introduce the digital web for retail investors. Banks give you whatever they pay you on your savings account, they earn 1.5–2% more on treasury bills. So why can't a small savings investor buy the treasury bill himself? And if you have a digital web portal, then anyone with 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 rupees can go and buy a treasury bill or buy a bit of a treasury bill. Treasury bills should also be fragmented once retail investors come in a big way. Greater access of foreign investors, not today, today we may not be attractive, but it can all change in a year and a half. Use global clearing systems, increase trading on the stock exchange itself, identify new assets for sukuk issues. The reason our sukuk issue is muted is because the government's had problems identifying assets. They exist. They usually need some clearing up on title, etc., which should be done, and then we should consider asset-light sukuks. For example, commodity financing. Asset-light means it's not a building, it's not a railway track, but it's a crop, which will disappear in 6 months' time. However, the crop produces cash flow. So you can do a lot of short-term financing for sukuks if you can get the right framework to issue asset-light sukuks. Tax is, I won't talk about it, let's take it for granted, we need to make these tax efficient. Reduce high level of central bank SMOs, OMOs and OMO, open market operations. These are injections that I'm referring to that the State Bank carries out. The State Bank buys treasury bills from banks, gives them fresh money, gives them money with which Now the old treasury bill is a repo. So the bill they bought hasn't been sold to them, it's been repoed. So it's still owned by the bank. Now with the money you've given the bank, you sell them a fresh government treasury bill. That money government's account into the ministry. This is government by the state bank indirectly as opposed to directly, primarily, where it's gone up trillions. It's 25% of our deposits, 60% of our loans. It's far too much. So the first success with more treasury bills should be to run this SMO figure down from 5.2 really under 1 over a long period of time, 1-2 trillion in the short term. Only taken, again in the interest of time, I've only taken one strategy for one of the most important reasons people hold, there's an informal market where, that is not unrecorded market where cash is obviously the way to trade, not through bank accounts, that gets you into the recorded market. But they're also important, the other important reason people hold cash is the transactional need. 96% of our transactions, our retail transactions are still cash. And this is, it's very significantly higher than anywhere else. So if we can get, we've got about 3.5 million vendors of all types, from supermarkets to small karyana stores. If we can persuade all of them to work on a QR code basis, then the buyer doesn't need to hold cash. Then if he gets his salary, he puts it into a bank account, he doesn't keep it at home. I'm talking about people earning 60, 70, 40,000 rupees a month. And all that cash then transfers to the banking system. Collectively, that would be a huge amount. Exemption of duties on digitization of fees, digitization of government revenue and government receipts and payment. This is already, the system has been prepared. I don't know the reason for the delay. It was sitting with the AGPR, the Accountant General, Pakistan Revenues, but the system is ready to work between the State Bank and the government. The technology has been established and all the banks. It's just up to the government to give its green light. Now this will deal with a lot, this will eliminate a lot of the cash if the government receives and pays digitally, because a lot of government payments are still in cash. CDNS, digitized CDNS, this is the National Savings Schemes. So foreign debt, domestic debt, getting the banks, enabling the banks to lend more through reducing the role of government and banks' balance sheet. This is the last slide I had. Development finance, as you saw, lending to the SMEs is only 6% of private sector lending by banks, and agriculture is the same, it's about 6%. Now, these sectors are the biggest employers in the country. They have the most potential to grow, and they are really, by and large, on the fringes of formal finance. So we need to get institutions that focus on them. If you look at the largest countries in Asia, the largest economies, you look at Japan, you look at South Korea, China, India, in their development stage, they built the middle of the economy through public sector development banks. Now they don't have to be public sector, but in their case they were public sector, who devoted to these things that I've put SMEs agriculture